The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
Okay, let's go.
I want to congratulate Ron and Nikki for having a good time together. We're all having a good time together. And I think they both actually did very well. I really do. I think they both did very well. I also want to congratulate Vivek because he did a hell of a job. He came from zero, and he's got a big percent, probably 8%, almost 8%, and that's an amazing job. They all did. They're all very smart people, very capable people.
Oh my God. Game of Thrones, man. Game of Thrones, the GOP Republican version. I'm forgetting last time when I talked about Game of Thrones, I think it was... yes, it was episode 72, where that was more geared around Biden and Kamala Harris and Netanyahu, and basically like playing both sides and all that. But man, this stuff is Game of Thrones. It really is. I mean, that was Trump literally after winning Iowa, and like, I like how he's like, Ron, Nikki, great job, guys. Really good effort. Vivek, I can't pronounce your name, but you know what? You did a hell of a job. You came from zero. You were at zero, and you got 7%. I can't even believe you did it. I don't know who those 7% are that gave you support. They should have supported me, but you did it, Vivek. Anyway, this stuff is funny, man. It is funny. You know, honestly, I like that Trump did that because prior to that, he like... you know, the dude always goes scorched earth. And again, I'm not going to lie. Sometimes I am a fan of scorched earth. I am. Sometimes I feel like scorched earth is necessary. I've gone scorched earth myself a few times in the business world, although I have regretted it. I have absolutely regretted it. I definitely had a situation where I went scorched earth and I completely regretted it. But I will say, a little testament to myself. Years later, I found that person on LinkedIn and I sent them an apology. And I said I was really, looking back in hindsight, I was very embarrassed with how I acted. And I really do apologize. But I wanted you to know, the reason I acted like that at the time was because of X, Y, and Z. And my intentions were in the right place. But I did not execute that properly. So I did apologize to him years later, and he was a gentleman and accepted my apology, and we are friends now to this day. So that's kind of cool. But anyway, in regards to just the reason I played that was, it's a little bit of a build on yesterday's episode, which talked about Dogma, and it talked about the concept of, really being trapped in others' opinions and being trapped in what other people think and claim to be reality. And that's what I'm trying to break out of. I really am. And that's what I want you to break out of. I want us to think for ourselves and gather data and gather opinions and then decide what we think. And, I'm going to play some additional things from yesterday. Actually, not from yesterday, but in addition to yesterday. And, I really do want to build on what we talked about yesterday. And that is, it's so cliche, but man, let's just get into the habit of calling a spade every day on everything with everybody, even if that means agreeing one day and disagreeing the next. And, I just thought of this, and I have to say it because he deserves it. I got to give a shout out, and a lot of you guys that know me will know Brad Hershey, my roommate from college the last 2 years, close friend for many, many years. I also love his mom, Mama Hershey, whom I keep in touch with probably better than I keep in touch with Brad these days, which is crazy. I love Mama Hershey. She's like a second mom to me. Took me and my brother in for Thanksgivings during college when our parents were living in Iran at the time during Thanksgiving time. And so we would have Thanksgiving at the Hershey's. And I will never forget those times because they were so meaningful. And I so appreciated her not only extending that invitation to me, but allowing my brother to join as well. That was awesome. But anyway, I'll give a shout out to Brad because Brad is like the old school call a spade guy. And if anybody listening knows Brad Hershey, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, he just inherently calls a spade. And sometimes it would be challenging to or uncomfortable to hear it. Actually, most of the time it was uncomfortable because he was making fun of me. But you know what? I give him credit. I really do. I really do. And now that honestly I taken on more of, I guess, this mindset, and I just think that's who he is, by the way. But I love it. I love it. I really do. It just feels more authentic. And here's the thing when it comes to, what I'm talking about, it's not about having to be confrontational to people. I will say this, and this might be interesting and also a technique. Oh, that's my mom calling. Man, this episode went super personal, super fast. All right, you know what? I might as well not edit that out and let you know. So when I go into podcast mode on my iPhone Focus podcast mode, the only thing I allow through is my mom. So actually my brother as well. So I allow the two of them in case they need anything, and in case there's an emergency, I take that call. So that was my mom, and it was not an emergency. Thank God. But, you never know. So, all right, what I was going to say was, this whole calling a spade thing, sometimes I just do it internally. I don't even make it an issue, like it's not about calling everybody out on everything. I mean, that might get a little crazy. It's more of how I think about things. It really is. It's more about how I think about things. And now that we've kind of gone down this path, this is one of those episodes that honestly I meant to start in one direction and now it's totally going a different direction, but I'm okay with that and I'm going to just go with it. So one of the things I've done, and this is part of the writing of the book, and it kind of just naturally happened, but it was actually really cool, was, I really am all about building, processes and systems and just methodologies. I think deep, shallow dive is a methodology. I really do. I think it's a methodology. And that methodology is you go deep, you stay shallow, and then you dive in. And you can take that methodology and apply it to, to so many things. And that's really what the book is going to be about. And that's something that, I'm going to try to continue to share with you guys episode after episode. And, hopefully maybe you'll embrace the deep, shallow dive methodology. The other thing that I've created is, I realized there were 4, and I call them pillars. There were 4 pillars of deep, shallow dive. And, these things just kept coming up for me and they kept resonating with me. And I finally kind of got them and put them down on paper and created some graphics for them. And again, they're going to be part of the book as well. And I'm going to try and intertwine them into more episodes. But these pillars are self-awareness, resilience, authenticity, and empathy. And, those are in no particular order, but for some reason, I have them in that order: self-awareness, resilience, authenticity, and empathy. And so I'm going to read these to you because I think these are cool. I really do. I think these are like 4 pillars of, again, somewhat of a methodology, but just things to be aware of and just characteristics really, that I'm trying to fully embrace for myself and be aware of. And so, what, I'll share them with you. So self-awareness, I defined that as conscious knowledge of one's own character, feelings, motives, and desires. So again, conscious knowledge of one's own character, feelings, motives, and desires. Resilience, the process and outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences. Again, resilience, the process and outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences. Authenticity, The quality of being genuine or real. You're true to your own personality, values, and spirit. Man, I love this one. I really do. Authenticity has always been a big thing for me. But again, the quality of being genuine or real, you're true to your own personality, values, and spirits. I love your own personality because that's really what it is to be authentic. You know, Brad Hershey is authentic, and I love you for that, Hersh. I really do. And I appreciate you. It only took 20 years, but just know that it's literally now in the annals, recorded for life, always available, that Ray Dustar appreciates Brad Hershey. Man, I can't believe I said that. Oh my God. He's going to hold that over my head for the rest of my life. All right. The last one, empathy. The ability to sense other people's emotions, coupled with the ability to imagine what someone else might be thinking or feeling. Let me read that again. Empathy. The ability to sense other people's emotions, coupled with the ability to imagine what someone else might be thinking or feeling. I will say empathy has really rung through for me, and you guys probably won't be surprised to hear this, but you know, this situation in Gaza between Israel and Palestine, empathy, man, it's really been forefront. It's been on the front burner for me. And that applies to, you know, the innocent Palestinian civilians, but it also applies to the families of the Israeli hostages. You know, I played that clip from one of the mothers of one of the hostages, and I was so impressed by, you know, her strength to try and look at this thing, I guess, across both sides. But man, I mean, if you really think about it, seriously, think about the families of the hostages. That's got to be miserable. That's got to be like just grueling every day, waking up knowing that your son, daughter, husband, wife, whomever, you know, is being held hostage. That's an awful feeling. And then by the same token, you know, obviously, you know, what's happening with the innocent Palestinian civilians and, you know, what they're going through. Honestly, if you can't feel empathy toward both of those groups of people, I said it in that other episode. I think you're broken. I think you're broken. Like, that's a real shame. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I really don't. But man, like, empathize with those people. And this is where that whole concept of role reversal that I've talked about, you know, putting yourself in the other person's shoes and doing a role reversal. And when I role reverse myself either into being a family member of a hostage or being, you know, an innocent civilian, or let's say not the actual civilian, but a family member of that civilian or somebody, I feel awful. I feel awful for both sets of those people. So I really think learning to embrace empathy and almost like take empathy in and not be scared of feeling empathetic. I think it's very powerful. So anyway, I thought I would share those with you. Those are available on the website. They're available on both sets of social media, my social media and the Deep Shallow Dive social media. I've got really cool graphics I created. If there anything you're interested in, you can screenshot the graphics or let me know. I'll send them to you. But self-awareness, resilience, authenticity, empathy. I'm telling you, they're 4 amazing characteristics that I'm striving to, you know, hone in on and continue to develop and just have them in my toolkit, as they say, when I'm addressing situations or when I'm, you know, having to deal with certain things. You know, I'll make sure I'm self-aware. I'll try to be resilient. I'll definitely try to be authentic, and I'll absolutely try to, you know, be empathetic toward that situation. And I feel like those are skill sets that can apply to our personal lives. They definitely can apply to the political world. I wish some of our political leaders had those pillars of skills, because I think right now, instead of trying to, you know, solve war with war, you realize war can't solve war, but peace can, you know, diplomacy can. I mean, what's the point of having all these diplomatic entities if we're not going to use diplomacy when it's needed? You know, what good is diplomacy when we're at peace? It's not. We need diplomacy when we're at war. All right, holy tangent of an episode. Okay, let me cover a few things that I talked about yesterday because I do want to get these on the table. First of all, Yemen, Yemen, Yemen. It is at the base of Saudi Arabia. So literally, if you think of Saudi Arabia as your hand, Yemen is going to be basically where your hand meets your wrist. It is on the left side. Oman is next to it on the right side. But just so you know where Yemen is, it's basically at the tip of, or I'm sorry, at the end of Saudi Arabia. For those of you that are like, what the heck is Yemen and why is he talking about that? Well, I'm talking about that because Yemen now is, front and center in the news because their military rebellion group is called the Houthis. Sometimes people say the Houthis, kind of like Hootie and the Blowfish, but it's actually pronounced Houthis. And I need to research them more and really understand, where they came from, when. From my initial look, they've been around since 1990. I mean, that's crazy. They've been around 30 years, and honestly, I had never really heard of them up until recent. But anyway, for now and for this episode, all I really want you to understand is that Yemen is a country at the base of Saudi Arabia. Again, they are an Islamic country, so it's part of the Muslim side of things, and their rebellion group is called the Houthis, and they're the ones that are basically causing havoc in the entry of the Red Sea as ships are trying to go through the Red Sea to then get into the Suez Canal. And I owe you guys an episode on the Suez Canal. I'm going to try to get that done. But the point is, it's like a big shipping lane. It's a very, very big global shipping lane, and these guys are wreaking havoc in there. And you've probably seen on the news, the United States and the UK are starting to rain hellfire on these guys. So we'll see. We'll see if they're able to withstand it or if they maybe bit off more than they can chew. But I will say, I'm getting vibes of the Viet Cong with these guys. And I also owe you a deep shallow dive on Vietnam because I don't really know that much about Vietnam, so I want to research that. But the one thing I do know is that when the United States went into Vietnam, they were surprised at how well the Viet Cong were able to fight. Obviously, they were on their home turf. They were in the jungles, so maybe they knew they had home field advantage, and maybe they knew how to fight in that environment better than the highly trained, highly sophisticated, supposedly much better United States military. But yeah, I'm getting like Viet Cong vibes about the Houthis because I will say some of the videos I've seen, this is pretty crazy. I mean, supposedly, and again, I don't know this, but supposedly a good part of their faction are, amputees, people with one arm, one leg. And I've seen a lot of videos where you do see a lot of, I guess, folks that you're just like, holy mackerel. But man, I really try not to judge people unless I've walked in their shoes. And like I said, I need to research this a lot more and try and really understand what is at play with these guys. But anyway, so that's the Houthis, that's Yemen. Talked about that a little bit yesterday and wanted to kind of just bring a little bit of clarity. So when you see that and hear that, you'll understand that that is at the base of Saudi Arabia. It's affecting shipping entry into the Red Sea, which then comes through the Suez Canal. Remember, we also talked about how there are rumors swirling that, this Gaza situation also has to do with the United States and Israel's desire to build a competitor to the Suez Canal that would go through Gaza. It's called the Ben Gurion Canal. And they're saying the demolition of Gaza is basically a way to clear the path for that canal so they could then compete with the Suez Canal and ideally take business from the Suez Canal, which is part of Egypt. So, there's a lot of factors at play with all this. We've talked about it before. I'll say it again. This is not a simple narrative, and don't fool yourselves to think it's all just about religion, because it's not. Now, I do think religion is at the core of this thing for sure. Maybe that's the core of hatred between Israelis and Palestinians. But then everyone else involved who are not Israeli and not Palestinian, religion is not their primary motive and their primary motivation. And you know what I mean. Dollar bills. Dollar bills. All right, lastly, I'm going to play you a follow-up clip from Tucker Carlson yesterday. I actually had somebody send this to me after yesterday's episode because they were like, oh my God, what you talked about was what he talked about. And did you hear this? And I had not. So here's what they sent me. And by the way, in the spirit of everything I talked about this episode, again, whether you like Tucker Carlson, hate Tucker Carlson, or are indifferent to Tucker Carlson, just listen to this. Just listen to this, take it in, decide for yourself if it's plausible. That's all I'm looking for. Is it plausible? And personally, I do think it's plausible. This also goes along the uniparty concept. I think I need to do kind of an episode or a half episode on the uniparty to really define that out. But again, whether you like Tucker, hate Tucker, whatever, indifferent, just be open-minded and listen to this and decide for yourself if something along this line is plausible.
Now, if Nikki Haley wins or even does very well in New Hampshire, it'll be a big story, of course, and we'll hear a lot about it. But then what happens? It's a long primary process. New Hampshire is just one small, heavily wooded state out of 50. Will Republicans in other states back Nikki Haley too? Will she win a string of these? Well, they're not going to vote for her voluntarily. Haley can only become the Republican nominee if Republican primary voters have no one else to vote for. So the plan works like this. Ron DeSantis drops out after losing a few contests in a row. He simply runs out of money and has to head back to Florida. That could happen. And at that point, liberal donors swing as a block behind Nikki Haley, giving her bottomless resources. That's already happening right now. And then critically, Donald Trump goes to jail. And that could happen too, to be honest. And at that point, bam, Nikki Haley wins the Republican nomination by default. Now, it's not a foolproof plan. A lot could go wrong. But at this point, it's the only plan. It's all that Democrats have. Joe Biden is going to have a very hard time getting reelected, much less serving another term. It's impossible to imagine that. Yet the party cannot replace him because that would leave Kamala Harris, who is even more unpopular than he is.
Really quick, I think they could replace him. Late minute scratch, health reasons, combination of Gavin Newsom, Kamala Harris, Michelle Obama, who knows. But I think they can replace him. But if not,
and so that means the Democratic Party is stuck with two fatally unpopular candidates. It's their doing, of course, but it's a massive problem. They can't get out of it. So their only option at this point is to run a Republican who has the same views as Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And that is exactly what they're doing right now, no matter what they tell you. And that candidate's name is Nikki Haley.
This episode was brought to you by Boost Liquid Vitamins. Wake up, take your Boost, start your day. Drink your vitamins, build your immune system with Boost. Available on Boost.com.